Hey you guys, my name is Janaea Robs. Welcome to episode 4 of Journey to the Bounceback. Let's hop into it. All right, so first of all, I have not actually chosen a title yet at this point, but I know it will come out in the course of this video. First of all, how are you guys? Let me know how you're doing in the comments. I pray that this year so far has been a blessing to you as it has been a blessing to me. I'm gonna take my glasses off because there's a glare and I don't like that. So God has been speaking a lot, a whole lot, and I pray that you have had the same experience. Some of you might be like me, and God might have you in a point in your life where He is taking you through major transition and shifts. I personally know that a lot of things in my life are about to change. I can feel it. He said it. He's confirmed it through so many people and through so many means. And so I know that it's going to happen. With that being said, you must be ready to transition. I believe it was episode 2 that we talked about pivoting, right? When you're on the journey of God sending you somewhere new, God placing you somewhere new, understand that you have to deal with your emotions, your desires, and you have to allow God to cut them. Because if you do not allow God to cut your flesh, if you do not allow God to regulate your emotions, if you do not allow God to even change your desires towards Him, then you will see destruction. And that's just the truth. So one of the major scriptures as I was praying, asking God, like, what do you want me to tie this into? So we know that Abraham's journey was a huge one. He had to leave comfort. He had to leave the place of his father's household, take everything and everyone attached to him, uproot them and move them to a foreign land. And it took faith. Imagine not just moving your family, but then having to move many people with you. And you're not going to a place that you're familiar with. Imagine. So there were a few things that stood out to me very well. Let's go to Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 through 3. And it reads, Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation. I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And these shall all families of the earth be blessed. So first of all, as we see this, again, this is God's call to action. This is God literally sending Abram to a new place. This is literally the direct command of God that it is time to get up and get out. And what we have to understand about God is when He says a thing, it is automatically implied that when we do the opposite thing, we're going to experience trouble. Now, one of the first things I noticed, and I'm sure some of you have noticed in the first parts of Abram's journey, was that he ended up making some moves that we don't have biblical proof of God telling him to do. When there was a famine in the land, Abram took his wife and they went into Egypt to try to escape the famine. But once they got there, Abraham knew that Sarai was beautiful. And he wanted to make sure that he wasn't killed so that she could be taken by the king. So what did he do? Bruh lied. He lied and said that it was his sister. The princes of Pharaoh actually saw Sarai and said, She's fine. We need to have her up in here. And evidently they brought her in, and Abram was rewarded greatly for his sister. God wasn't having that because God is a God of covenant, and covenant existed between Abram and Sarai. And so what did he do? He caused plagues to come upon the house of Pharaoh. So much so that Abram had to come clean and admit that he had lied about his sister. His wife. You see why doing stuff like that messes things? Just don't do it. I'm calling Sarai his sister. Anyway, now no, before Abram even got to Egypt, he actually had found a resting place. God settled him on a mountain between Bethel and Hai. And it is there that he built an altar of thanks unto the Lord, an altar of remembrance. After then is when he moved out of that place of rest and he went to Egypt, again, without the command of the Lord. And we see how that ended up. One of the reasons I want to highlight this is because what we cannot afford to do in this hour is make the mistake of allowing our fear and our flesh to cause us to walk outside of the place that God has ordained along the journey. Now, had Abram stayed on that mountain, surely the Lord would have sent provision. Surely the need would have been met. But this is what happens when we operate out of flesh and out of fear. Let's be real. Abram could have gotten his wife killed. He could have gotten himself and his wife killed because of his decision to lie to Pharaoh. So what we do has great effect, not just on us, but also on those who are connected to us. However, after Abram and Sarai leave Egypt, he returns back to what? The intended place of God. He goes back to that same mountain where he built an altar of remembrance and an offering of thanks, thus putting him back into alignment with God. It's not that we won't make mistakes along the way, because we're still unfortunately wrapped in flesh. However, returning back to the place of alignment will be key in your story versus someone's story that we're going to talk about. Now, let's deal with Brother Lot. Lot was Abram's nephew, and Lot went with Abram and his family on this journey. After they came out of Egypt, they went right back to that spot between Bethel and Hai, and they rested there. But what they quickly found was that the land could not support Lot's cattle and Abram's cattle, and that they had to make a decision to separate. Now, Abram, being the man of integrity that he is, he allowed Lot to choose. He said that if you go to the left, then I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, then I'll go to the left. So he allowed Lot to choose. Now, Lot, being like most of us, he chose that which glittered, that which looked bountiful, that which looked like, baby, I'm going to succeed there. He chose the land towards Jordan and the land that was very close to Sodom. Understanding that as we're on this journey, like for instance, some of us, God is literally telling, you're about to be moved to a new place. God is about to pick you up and move you to a new place. And you might still be in the decision-making process or trying to hear from God where it is that you are actually supposed to move. And in that decision-making process, you might find yourself vacillating between, well, this one looks like it can support me better. This one looks like there's more opportunity for me, or even just that it looks more comfortable. But the danger in that is you must choose what God tells you to do. If you notice, Lot did not seek the Lord on which way he should go. He simply just went based on what he saw with his natural eye. Abram went to the right, and to the right there was safety. Lot ended up in a place of destruction, full of pure debauchery and uncleanliness and sin. Now, after Lot went his separate way and Abram went his separate way, Lot found himself in a bad way. War ensued between multiple kings, including the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Elam. And the king of Elam, I'm going to try to say his name, but if I butcher it, Bible scholars, forgive me. Chedorlaomer. Y'all look it up. It's in chapter 14. Amen. Chedorlaomer. That's the last time I'm going to say his name because I know I'm butchering it. But this king of Elam went into Sodom, took all of their goods, took Lot and then his personal goods, and all of Gomorrah's goods. And evidently, Abram, when he got word, he went to hunt down his family. He said, I'm gonna go get my fam. When Abram got word that his nephew had been captured, he took his servants with him. They hunted down the king of Elam, slaughtered him, and then they rescued Lot. And not only did they rescue Lot, he brought back all them goods with him. Abraham was warned by the two angels before they got to Sodom and Gomorrah that destruction would come. As we advance to chapters 18 and 19, this is a story we all know well. It's a story of Sodom and Gomorrah and what happens with Lot and his wife. Evidently, as we've already covered, Lot made a decision based in his desires and ended up in a city that was foul. By the time the word of the Lord came forth about the destruction that he was going to send to Sodom and Gomorrah because of the depravity, Lot already knew what existed there. Lot was very aware of the sin that was surrounding him and his family, and he chose to stay. So much so, we know that in chapter 19, when the angels actually get to the city, after Abraham prays and intercedes for the cities, when the angels arrive, Lot hurries them into his house. He pleads with them to come in because he is fully aware of the sin that would occur if those angels were to stay outside like they wanted to. They wanted to wait and look around and see what was up. Lot persuaded them to come inside, and immediately, of course, those men in the city began banging on the door like, bring them out, bring them out. And we must be careful about being again led by our flesh and our desires in such a way that it will cause us to turn our eyes, to turn away from what we know is a place of debauchery. Be careful about allowing your desires, your feelings, to lead you to a place that you know is full of sin, that you know is not ordained for you, that you know you shouldn't even be, but you're there because something about it makes you comfortable or something about it makes you feel good. We're not doing that in 2023. When the word of the Lord comes forth, we are responding. Now, those angels were sent there to find any left behind who were righteous. Lot and his family were the only ones left. And I believe that they might not have even been spared had Abraham not interceded for them. Now, when the angels, again, they got there, they came into the house, they told Lot what was going to happen. And as they left, they were told to not look back and that they would surely die if they looked back. Lot's wife looked back, and we know she turned into a pillar of salt. Know that I remember growing up and hearing that story, being like, man, she was dumb. Like, why didn't she just listen? But the fact of the matter is this: when you have become too comfortable in a place that God has told you to leave, you will hold and cling on to it out of familiarity. You will hold and cling on to the thing that makes you feel good. You will hold and cling on to the thing that you thought was supporting you. But in reality, it was leading you to destruction and death. We cannot, people of God, at this point on the timeline, we cannot hold on to the things that make us comfortable. Some of you are about to take serious faith journeys. Some of you are about to be led to places that you could not imagine. Some of you are about to be led to places that you're not necessarily jumping up and down about. My son just got home from school, so I got lost in the flow. But I want each of you to know, and hear me, people of God, hear me, that 2023 is going to yield amazing things if you allow God to lead you and you remove your emotions and your feelings and your desires from it. That doesn't mean that you're not going to feel normal human emotion, right? It doesn't mean that you can't feel it, but what it does mean is that you cannot allow it to rule you. Where Lot and his wife dwelled and where they decided to set up residence because of all that it seemed to offer, it likely led to the perversion of their daughters. Understand that where you are has a spiritual effect on your person and on your children. Where you are does indeed have a spiritual effect on you and those who are attached to you in that place. Know that when Lot and his daughters were able to flee from Sodom and Gomorrah, they went up into the mountains. His daughters, even though they had not been deflowered, I was trying to find a way to say that nicely. Even though they had not been deflowered, I believe that perversion, the spirit of perversion, had already rested on them and it already began to oppress them. Because when they got into those mountains, they decided that they were going to lay with their father to try to continue his lineage because their mother was gone. The fact that Lot's daughters resorted to getting him drunk, to lie with him, to have sex with him, to continue his lineage, it already speaks to the failure that resulted, the level of failure, the level of destruction that resulted in Lot's poor decisions, right? It never should have happened. None of that ever should have happened. And when I went back to read this story, instead of me just looking at it one way, God really showed me that the difference between these two men's journeys was that one was led completely by the lust of his eye. But the truth is that God's hand was on Abram, and Abram was a man who followed the voice of God. Be men and women that follow the voice of God into terrain that looks difficult. Be men and women that follow the voice of God into places that are unexpected. Man cannot live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. So if you are attempting to feed yourself with bread, if you are attempting to get to the place that looks like provision because you're hungry, you're already in error because you cannot live by that alone. You cannot. You will surely die just living off of that alone. You have to live by the word of God. You have to incline your ear to God, and then you have to respond to what he says, right? And by all means, make sure that you are dealing with your flesh, with your emotions, and with your desires. Submit them all to God daily and allow him to lead you in this process. I'm not going to hold you guys longer because I've been long-winded today, but I love you so much. Again, thank you so much for your continued support for the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. Send it to somebody you know. Get the word and the message out. I love you guys. I will see you next week.